everybody, it's Miss Pam from Dodge Nature Center. Hope everybody's doing good. I'm doing well myself. Miss having students out at the Nature Center. But today we find ourselves here at the Lilydale Brickyards here in the middle of St. Paul. And this park is kind of a little hidden gem. I would highly recommend, if you've never been here, to come down and take a stroll someday with your family. It's a super cool place and it's really part of the St. Paul history. If you're looking behind me, you can actually see the remains of an old brick oven. So what used to be down here was a community. It's a little bit ghost towny, so if you do some research, it's sort of fun. The claim was that the people that lived down here lived on boats and trailers because this flooded all the time. And so they would have to move very quickly to get out. In about I think it was in the early 1900s, they actually relocated those people because they just decided to make this a floodplain. But what was down here was buildings. There was even supposedly a little schoolhouse down here. And the St. Paul Brick Company was established in the late 1800s. And for 130 years, that company made bricks right here. They would actually mine the sand from the caves, which we'll show you in a moment, and the Dakar shale from the cliffside. And the way they mixed it would create different colors. They would actually bake it in this fascinating old kiln or oven. And this is just a small piece of what the kiln was. It actually extended out about another 100 feet. And if you think that maybe you don't make a lot of money, we talked to a man that worked here in the 1940s and he made 35 cents an hour. So if you think that if you're not making enough babysitting, think about 35 cents an hour. They actually would transport the bricks out of here on a horse and wagon back in the day. Finally, they started to remove them with trains and they'd send them out on the barges that you can still see today moving up and down the Mississippi River. So if you get a chance, I highly recommend come on out and take a look at the kiln. So if you look behind me, you can actually see one of the man-made caves that's here down in the Lilydale Brickyards. This cliff is dotted with these caves, and unfortunately most of them have now been dynamited. It can be a dangerous place to go into. Every few years, sadly, somebody does perish in here. Kids go in, they light fires, and then of course the oxygen gets used up. But this one behind me here is called Echo Cave, and it's been used for many things. They were dug out by hand from the top down, starting way back in the 1800s. And they've been used for a wide variety of things. The rumor has it that during the Prohibition time, way back in the early 1900s, they used to store alcohol here in these. And there's actually been a brewery that resided in one. Over the years after that, when they closed that down, they grew mushrooms inside the caves. And it seems kind of crazy, but it's the perfect habitat for growing mushrooms. Caves are always about 55 degrees and they have high humidity, which is perfect for growing mushrooms. After that, some of the caves were actually turned into restaurants. You can still see one of those down on the corner of Wabasha and Plato. People use it, they even get married in that one. Hopefully that will resume after the virus. And this cave behind me now is actually nicknamed the Bat Cave. In the 1950s, a scientist discovered bats living in here. And if you're doing any reading in the newspaper or online these days, you know bats are really struggling. And so this is a spot where the little brown bat actually will hibernate. There can be thousands of them in this cave during the winter. And as it gets colder, they'll migrate a little bit in. As it gets warmer, they'll actually shuffle a little bit farther out. There's a gate inside here called the Bat Gate. And so it's there so that people don't go in and disturb the bats. I'll tell you a secret, I actually worked at a wildlife clinic and we would actually release bats into this cave after the winter when they could survive. So it's kind of another cool spot down here in Minnesota, right in the middle of our cities. That's a really fun place to come and explore.
All right, 8th graders, you just saw Miss Pam over here by the Echo Cave, which if you look, that's all sandstone. And what I think is really, really cool is this here. This wasn't, you might think people put this here. This was laid down by an ancient ocean 450 million years ago. So the sand I'm holding is 450 million years old. And how this works is Minnesota, and it wasn't Minnesota then, but 450 million years ago was very close to the equator, and it was covered with, they estimate, 100 to 150 foot of ocean water. So this was an ocean. They were the first prehistoric sharks were swimming through here, etc. But the sandstone at the brickyards is 450 million years old, and then as we go up, it'll get younger, and that's just based on our law of superposition. So brickyard's really cool. We don't have represented all 4.6 billion years of geologic time, but we have the last 450 million years of geologic time, sort of, and we'll talk about that as we go on.
So behind me you can see this beautiful waterfall, and what's happening, as you'll see in the video shortly, is that this waterfall is actually carving out this gorge. It also actually is draining the neighborhood up above. And so if we were here a couple million years from now, this waterfall would be way up at the top of the hill and it would be no more.
All right, so we've come up a little bit, and based on the law of superposition, now we are at slightly younger layer of rock. And you can see behind me, Miss Pam talked about this waterfall a little bit. That's limestone. So we had a sandstone layer, and then above it, a little bit younger limestone layer, maybe 5 million years younger. And some fossils in that limestone, but you're gonna see as we go up to the next youngest layer of shale, it is full of fossils, and Mr. Schlehuber will talk about that. As geologic time, we're in the Ordovician period, and we will hit a little bit here Silurian period, and then you'll see we'll fast forward through a whole bunch of periods to the very top of the brickyards, which is the Quaternary period. All right, so now we're to this next shale layer, which is a little bit younger than the limestone. The limestone is younger than the sandstone, and that's all law of superposition, just how it gets laid down. This muddy layer, and mostly still the Ordovician era, but a little bit of Silurian fossils would probably be found amongst here as well. And if you really look at this, it is very muddy soil. Shale is actually made from mud, which, to be very honest, you're talking about probably poop from giant ocean creatures made a lot of this 435 million years ago. Mr. Schlehuber later will talk about what you can find as evidence that Minnesota was once covered in ocean. There is really one more significant rock layer at the brickyards. It's just a small limestone layer that would be there. When we were walking down, you could see some of that limestone, which of course would be younger than this. This is younger than the limestone down there, and then younger, of course, than the sandstone, which is the oldest at the brickyard. The strange thing in Minnesota is from about 430 million years to 500,000 years. So 429,500,000 years are lost from the fossil record. And that was our question on the quiz yesterday. And whether you got it right or wrong, I'm still going to give you credit if you came up with something somewhat intelligent. But the reason has to do with our glacial history. We had ice sheets coming into Minnesota, glaciers coming into Minnesota, and this is for 500,000 years plus. And literally they ground up, pulverized, dragged back, and buried 429 plus million years of fossil record. So you don't, if you want to dig up dinosaur bones, you don't do it in Minnesota. Were there dinosaurs roaming around here at one point in time? Yes, there were, but there's no longer any fossil evidence because of our glacial past. All right, we're on top of that shale layer. So I'm standing, it's about 430 million years ago. This was formed, except these, of course, if I can fly one out here, these bricks were only formed over 100 years ago, which for most of us is a long time. As we go up much further, it is a very recent geologic past. So we get even you know, at the top, just from the last few thousand years, that soil was laid down by glaciers. Really cool behind me, take a look, it's a little hard to see, but you got the power plant there, and just beyond that is the High Bridge, or the Smith Avenue Bridge. And that bridge used to be the location of a waterfall bigger than Niagara Falls. And we put a little video in there, hopefully you can see it. That waterfall, because of erosion over 12,000 years, has gone into Minneapolis, and now is where St. Anthony Falls is, a much smaller waterfall, but really cool if you get a chance to drive past the Stone Arch Bridge.
Heritage, it's Mr. Schlehuber here in St. Paul Brickyards, as naturalist Pam was telling you about. And we're standing on a fossil hill, or a shale hill. And my job today is to tell you a little bit about the fossils that are here. So as you're learning about in 8th grade science, we're learning that fossils are evidence that there was life in prehistoric times. And fossils could go back thousands of years, or in this case, millions of years, or many millions of years. Right now, we're standing on this hill, and we're actually back in the Paleozoic era. So different where we live today in the Quaternary era, you know, recent times. We're way back in time, back in the Paleozoic, and more specifically, we're in the Ordovician period, which was 488 million years ago to 444 million years ago. So this hill, and everything that lived here on this hill, goes back over 400 million years. Pretty incredible. I want to tell you first a little bit about fossils. You know, there are really 5 different types of fossils when we find a fossil. The first one that we think about is a mold or a cast. A mold or a cast, let's start with a mold. If there's an animal and it leaves an imprint, it will make what's called a mold, and you can see that there was an imprint of that animal. I want to show you one, actually. I brought a pretty cool animal right here, and you can see that the top of this rock, you can see that there's something there, and that's an example of what's called a mold. Okay, it left an imprint. We can kind of guesstimate what that was. Actually, I'm lucky that this animal also left a cast. So here's the whole rock, and here it is, and the cast is an actual kind of copy of that animal. It's all filled in with minerals, and this animal is actually called a trilobite, which is really cool because it's actually found right here on this shale hill as well. So we'll be looking for trilobites, but that's a mold and that's a cast. Another fossil type is called petrified. Petrified is when the fossil has been replaced, or the animal's been replaced by minerals. I have an example here too. Couple of examples. This looks like a piece of wood, but actually it is stone. So that is wood that was turned to stone. It's been petrified. And one that I thought you might like is, this is a dinosaur tooth. This is probably from like a velociraptor or something. Given to me by a paleontologist. Again, it's turned to stone, but you can imagine a mouthful of teeth that this had. So that's petrified. Another one is a carbon film. I don't have a carbon film with me, but I bet you've probably seen a carbon film. I recently saw one in my garage. I was sweeping up my garage, and some of the leaves from this fall left an imprint on my cement in my garage. And I could, even though I swept the leaves away, I could see the imprint of the leaf. It's kind of like a carbon film, just a thin memory of what was there. And then, of course, we have what's called trace fossils. You know, when I was walking down the path here today, I saw a trace fossil. Not really, it's just boot prints. So footprints or a tail drag of an animal is called a trace fossil. It doesn't tell us much, but we can tell that there was something there. And finally, the preserved remains, which is my favorite. Preserved remains is where you have the actual animal preserved. And this can happen a few different ways. One would be in in tar, which is a natural substance. Maybe you've heard of La Brea tar pits out in California where saber-toothed tigers have fallen in and then they pull out the actual animal that's been there forever. Or sometimes in resin or amber. Maybe you saw the movie Jurassic Park and you saw the little mosquitoes that are kept in amber. It's pretty neat. Maybe you've seen an insect that gets caught in tree sap. It's kind of like the same thing. And finally, ice. In parts of Siberia, maybe you've heard of the woolly mammoth that they found. Totally intact. It's just been frozen over time. So there's 5 fossils. Today we're going to be looking for mostly casts and molds. And we're going to be looking for the prehistoric fossils that lived here in a shallow sea. So most of these are marine fossils. And I'm going to tell you about a few of them, the main ones. I have Miss LaPointe kind of zoom in here. We're going to be talking about, we're going to be looking for worms, snails, corals, cephalopods, and I'll just tell you a couple things about these. A cephalopod is related to like what's called a squid or an octopus. They're really neat. And then of course the trilobite I showed you, clams. So, and crinoids, that's really cool, very common. We'll probably find those. They look, you know, not like much of course, but they're actually related to starfish and other echinoderms for their spiny skin. So we're gonna take a little break here. We're gonna start digging. I've got Elizabeth Barnes, 8th grader. Hey Elizabeth, she's over there. Naturalist Pam, there's Mr. Dowd, and of course Miss LaPointe behind camera. We're gonna be looking and digging and we'll take a break here. We'll see what we find. All right, see you in a minute.
We've got Elizabeth here helping us dig for fossils. We've got Miss Pam, Mr. Dowd, Mr. Schlehuber. We're all gonna do some digging and we'll see what we can find.
So boys and girls, if you come out here, it's almost impossible to not find fossils. We've been here for about 5 minutes and you can see the nice little variety that I found just by looking down. Didn't even have to disturb any of the soil on the shale hill.
All right, you guys, so Miss LaPointe just dug around and found this awesome little clam here. I'll zoom in, hopefully you can get a good view of it. Will you lay that down flat a little bit more? There we go. So we got this little clam, and then I'll try and put this magnifier over it. Not sure if it's gonna work for you guys. Yeah, we can't see it through the magnifier.
There's some
but that's just a cute little clam. I'll give you another angle of it here. And then on this fossil behind it, actually here we want to talk about this one.
Yeah, this is a rock from this hill, and you can see all these little circles, and these are crinoids. So crinoids are related. They're to sea urchins and sea stars. They're called spiny-skinned creatures, and they look like little donuts, but they grow in these stacks. So it's just full of them.
Yeah, look at that one. It's gorgeous.
Just full of them. It's really neat.
We've got some more crinoids on here, and then there's a nice big chunk of
Oh,
them in
that's
here.
awesome. Look at that one.
Mm-hmm. You almost see a good chunk of the stalk
Cool.
on the animal.
Good finds.
Oh, yeah. Bryozoan sort of.
Well,
mix up, 'cause
bryozoan
they
is-
sort of
was
aren't
an
right.
ancient
It's just
coral.
a specific
Okay, I don't know
kind.
if you can see this, Miss LaPointe, but here we have probably a bryozoan. You can see it kind of branching. It's either that or a brachiopod, but probably a bryozoan.
No, it's
And,
cool. It looks like a fan.
Yeah. Awesome.
They're all over in here.
Found that in just a matter of minutes.
Miss LaPointe, you gotta come over here. Look
Oh
at
gosh,
this.
I'll be right
Oh
back.
my gosh.
Oh my gosh, Mr. Dowd, what did you
What did you
find?
So I was digging around here,
Oh my gosh!
and these are 2 different types. So this is an ammonite, which were sort of like the nautilus today, cephalopods. So this would have been a soft-bodied tentacles coming out. And this is Orthoceras, which was a squid-like creature as well that had a hard shell, but the squid came out on the top of it. And these are both in the Ordovician and Silurian period, so it's perfect. I just got a little bit lucky kind of digging in here.
Wow.
Awesome.
Very lucky.
Crazy.
Okay, so here we have a fossil not from this area, but I brought it along today so you guys could see it. And this is obviously a fish, and this would be a mold of its skeleton. So it's pretty neat. The fish died, it decomposed, was covered up by sediments, and you can find a little skeleton. And here's another one. This looks like just regular old rock, and it's sandstone. This was actually from when I lived in California. Well, a student brought it to me who lived about 10 miles from the ocean and brought it to class and found it in his backyard.
That's so cool.
Max, and the question was, Max couldn't believe it because he lived so far from the ocean, why there'd be a scallop shell. And it was evidence that, you know, the ocean level changed. So that was really neat.
Cool.
And finally, who doesn't love shark teeth? These are pretty commonly found at construction sites. Again, these were found in a construction site in California. A guy was operating an excavator, dug up some sandstone, and in that sandstone were these shark teeth. So I'm not sure how old they are, but they've turned to stone, so certainly millions of years. Just more evidence of life before present day. Fossils.
Hey everybody, so we had a great time here down at the Lilydale Brickyards. We highly encourage you, though, to make sure that you get out and enjoy some of these wonderful St. Paul parks over the next few months. So take care, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon.
See you guys.
Bye!